I think this escalator is filled with the power of the dark side. Hi, I'm Father Roderick, and I'm here at my local theater about to watch Star Wars 7, The Force Awakens for the 5th time. I saw it first at the world premiere in Amsterdam, the red carpet premiere. I recorded a video that's up on my YouTube channel if you want to see it. That's youtube.com/Father Roderick. And afterwards, I've seen it several times, and I can't wait to see it another time. For me, this is more than just watching a movie over and over again. It's like a good book. You want to read it several times. But for me, this is also research. I am going to record an in-depth analysis with my good friend Dom Bettinelli. And we are going to go through this movie minute by minute. And in order to know what I'm talking about, of course, I need to see this movie several times. So one of the reasons that I can see Star Wars so many times is that I have a flat fee subscription to my local theater. So I've got this card. The only thing I need to do is to punch in my number, select a seat, and I can see as many movies as I want every time of the day, every day of the week. So I've picked this seat. It's on the 6th row, and here's the screen, but it's kind of off center. So this is actually quite good. Right there in the middle of the screen. It's actually one of the best seats I've had so far. And there's my ticket. Star Wars 3D, theater number 1. So I'm going to give you my review of The Force Awakens, spoiler-free, entirely spoiler-free, so don't worry, right after I've seen it for the 5th time. Check it out. Awesome. All right, here we go. Force Awakens. So I just saw The Force Awakens for the 5th time. It is in the middle of the day today, so to my surprise, lots of families, lots of smaller kids. Way too small, because of course the official rating is PG-13. Here in the Netherlands that means 12 years and older, unless they are accompanied by an adult. And that is clearly the case. But it's good to see that kids do enjoy the movie and can totally watch it without too many traumas, at least as far as I can tell. So Star Wars 7, The Force Awakens is of course the beginning of a whole new chapter in the history of Star Wars. There are 2 more movies, sequels, direct sequels to this story, and we will have those in-between standalone movies. But the most important thing that this movie had to do is establish a whole new group of actors, new heroes, that will be able to carry the saga forward. And let's talk about those new actors, because that is one of the things that impressed me most about The Force Awakens. It's the quality of the acting. Both Kylo Ren, Rey and Finn are played by wonderful young actors, and I think that they, in some respects, even surpass what the older actors have been doing in the previous movies. The quality is fantastic. The chemistry is also something that really was shining through. I already knew from kind of watching the social media accounts from Daisy Ridley and John Boyega that those two were very good on set, had a very good rapport. It's great to see that same chemistry on the screen. It really, really helps me have confidence in the movies that follow. Also, I noticed that both of them, and I'm talking about Rey and Finn, have a certain intensity, a certain complexity to their character. Most of all, Rey, of course, which I think is very promising for the sequels to this story. But also Kylo Ren is a great villain. I love what they did with his character. Also very complex, not as straightforward black and white as we've seen in previous Star Wars movies. So acting is great. New actors, fantastic. The older actors, the recurring characters, are of course what makes this movie feel so much like, you know, the olden days. To see our heroes back on the screen, to discover what's been going on in between that time that we left them at the end of the Return of the Jedi and the beginning of this movie. it's thrilling. It is so thrilling. And of course, they had to kind of throw away most of the expanded universe, but now that I've seen what they did with this story, I understand that choice. I really, really applaud them for the courage to kind of reboot it and go in a direction that nobody could predict. Which brings me to another thing that I loved about this movie, and that is not having known that many spoilers. Of course, I've seen what was in the trailers, and we've all seen that, but after a few minutes, you've seen it all. And most of the movie, I would say 95% of the movie, was completely new to me and managed to surprise me time and again. And of course, Star Wars wouldn't be Star Wars without lots of merchandise. And here, even in the theater, they've got stuff. So you've got these, want to know what it is, key rings, pens, and these are very cool too. You've got coffee mugs. Check it out. You can drink coffee with the Force instead of milk. Let's talk about the story. This is where some people have criticized Star Wars 7: The Force Awakens for being a little bit too repetitive. A lot of the plot seems so familiar and so much like movies that we've seen before that to some people this movie was a disappointment. However, this is something that I think belongs to the story of Star Wars. Its storytelling is not linear, but it's cyclical. This is very kind of almost oriental in the way that George Lucas loves to tell these stories. We're not just watching new characters, new storylines. We're watching archetypes, recurring themes, recurring situations. This movie is chock full of references to all the 6 movies that came before it. And it's actually, to me, is the big appeal of this movie. And that's why I could watch it so many times, and I'll probably watch it several more times after this one. It is like constantly you see these structural resemblances between this movie, between the characters, the situations in which they are, even the lines of the characters that give us kind of like mirror images of stuff that we saw before. Now, this is not just something that you see in Star Wars. You also see it in the Bible. You see these recurring themes that are like the way that the New Testament, for instance, looks back on the stories in the Old Testament. It retakes certain themes, certain situations, and even Jesus is often the fulfillment of promises that were made in the Old Testament. So it brings back that ancient history and kind of gives it a new spin. Let's talk about the music, because of course, what would Star Wars 7 be without John Williams? The thing that struck me is that most of the music is entirely new, and something that disappointed me the first time that I saw the movie is you don't have that many kind of strong themes, like what I always call hummable themes. Most of the hummable themes that are in this movie are themes from the old movies, and they are brought back at specific moments in the movie to help the storytelling, to let us know, oh, wait a minute, pay attention now, because you know this theme, you know what it says in the old movies, well, here's what it says about these new situations and these new characters. What I missed was one, theme that is defining almost of Star Wars 7. You could say that the theme that he wrote for Daisy Ridley's character, for Rey, is perhaps the most recognizable new theme. But it's more, to me, it sounds more like Harry Potter than like Star Wars. Well, anyway, it is, but it's still John Williams. I mean, I prefer him to any other composer that they could have hired for this. I think this escalator is filled with the power of the dark side. Let's talk about the action and the special effects. One of the things that is very, very well done in this movie is that a lot of the effects that you will see are practical effects. And I would say most of the digital additions, like the set extensions or some of the scenes where they've been done digitally, are still done in the style as if they were using props, as if they were using scale models. So even in that respect, the movie almost looks old-fashioned. It looks like what we've seen in 4, 5, and 6. And it really, really helps convey the notion that this is the old Star Wars, the Star Wars that we remember. What about the 3D? To me, the 3D really adds to the story, especially when you have the fights, when you have these big vistas. The 3D is not just an afterthought. I think it really enhanced. It made me feel like I was in the movie, and there were some flying scenes where I felt like I was in the cockpit. That's the kind of stuff that you can only do in 3D. However, this movie I think holds up very, very well in 2D as well, and that's due to the fact that they filmed this mostly on old-fashioned celluloid, on film. They didn't use digital cameras like George Lucas did in the prequels. And that too kind of helps. It makes for a more kind of relaxed viewing. I don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes in these newer 3D or like post-production 3D movies, everything is so digital that it is too overwhelming. This movie has a certain, even like a visual kind of rest to it. Which brings me to the last thing that I loved about this movie. It is the pacing. This movie is fast action. It plunges you in the middle of the story, just like George Lucas used to do with episode 4 and 5 and 6. There's always a lot already going on, and so there's a lot of speed in this movie. But fortunately, the movie also takes time to slow down at certain points, to mark a certain emotion, to let us take it all in. And that is, I think, really quality directing, but more importantly, quality editing. This movie has really good pacing between action scenes and character scenes and scenes where it's just, just sit back and relax and then just enjoy the view. And I was very glad that they did that, because we got so many of these, ADD type of movies where you're like, please stop. However, there is a lot of action, and the action is very good. And yes, it does mirror a lot of the action in the previous movies, but let's not forget that a lot of what we saw in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi was also mirrored by similar scenes in The Phantom Menace, in Episode 2, Episode 3. And so what J.J. Abrams has done, what Kasdan has done in the script writing for this movie is, I think, very much in the tradition of what George Lucas has done always. And what makes Star Wars Star Wars. Now, let me see what they have. So this is cool, one with a stormtrooper. This one is more vintage. It has the covers of the old comics, the comic books that I used to read when I was 12 years old and the first movies were in theater. This one I like the most. I want this one. Check it out. It's R2-D2 as a coffee mug. You know what? I think I'm gonna buy it. So, let's summarize this. I thought that this movie surpassed anything that I expected of this movie. I can see that some people might be critical of some points or some of the repetition, but I think, if you keep in mind that this is part of the type of storytelling that Star Wars tries to do, I'm totally okay with it. And I love it, because it makes me want to go back and make all those links and connections and see the mirror images and scenes and sequences. I mean, there are too many to count. And for those of you that expected something fresh, something original, a new style perhaps even, that's why we have those in-between movies. The standalone movies will be able to do everything else. And you will see different genres taking place in the Star Wars universe, but feeling very, very different from the, let's say, the trilogy movies that we get. So I am more than happy with this movie. I am excited. I love it. And I mean, this is one of the rare movies that I've already seen 5 times in the span of 2 weeks, and that I plan to see at least 5 more times, if not more. I've already seen this movie more than I've seen most of the prequels. So that would be my recommendation for you. Go watch it. If you've seen it, go watch it again. I think as Star Wars fans, we're in for a glorious future. May the Force be with you.